Hey everybody, welcome to Collaborating Agents and our bi-monthly collaboration meetings. Today, our own Kristina Lincoln is going to talk to us about how to understand a title report. I know in all states that the agent doesn't necessarily see the title report. In Washington, you actually, as the agent, get a copy of the title report. I know in Ohio we don't, but I always ask my clients to send it to me so I can take a look at it and make sure that they don't have any questions. Because the reality is, even if it didn't come from us, our clients always come to us first with questions. So Kristina is going to talk to us about how to interpret a title report. Take it away, Kristina.
So thank you for joining us today. I'm talking about how to read and interpret a title report. You may ask yourself, like, why is this such an important topic, or why should you think that it's an important topic? So I'm going to tell you how I came about thinking that this is a soapbox issue for me, and it is an important part of our job. And unfortunately, I think it's a part of our job that is overlooked. I will apologize for my voice. I'm sorry, I started losing my voice yesterday. I think it's allergy related, so I don't always sound this sexy. So first of all, I assumed that every real estate agent thoroughly read through title reports when they were sent over, but apparently that's not the case. I was recently in my EXP group meeting. There was about 45 of us agents there, and our title representative was giving a presentation, and she asked the question, by show of hands, raise your hand if you read and review thoroughly title reports for your clients. And there was only 2 of us in the room that raised their hand. And so that was my first indication that this part of our job is being overlooked and shouldn't be overlooked. Then more recently, I was at a BIAW forecast planning meeting, and a Pierce County planning gal was chatting with me after the meeting, and she said, Kristina, how can we get real estate agents to review title reports with their clients and help their clients understand the encumbrances that come along with buying properties? And that was just a cue to me, a second cue to me that this is an important topic that we should really take seriously as real estate agents. I just couldn't help I just can't help wonder, like, why don't we read the title reports? Do we just assume that that's the responsibility of the title company, and so we don't really care what's on the title report? And I'm not trying to tell you that you're doing anything wrong. That's not what I'm talking about today. It's just about bringing to the surface an issue of understanding that a title report is very important, and asking that we agree to start practicing the reviewing of title reports on behalf of our clients, for the desire that we bring a higher level of service in the industry. I also want to make it clear that I'm not trying to represent myself as any kind of an expert. I'm just sharing with you experiences that I have found. And as we go along on these slides, you will come to see that I have experienced lots of interesting things on behalf of my clients. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is looking at the title report. And the title report will include a whole bunch of blue hyperlinks. And it's in those hyperlinks where all this detective work begins and hopefully ends. The first thing that we're going to look at is probably the most obvious thing, is ownership. The first section on the title report will show you the owner's name. And of course, that's the most important part. But honestly, there are many times when a property owner will tell you they they are the owner on title, but they're not. The first section shows you the proper name. There could be attached documents. If the ownership is an LLC or a corporation name, there should be links to those corporate documents so you can do detective work for yourself and see if the person representing to you as the owner of the property is part of that LLC or corporation. And if they are not, then the title company is going to need the documents for proof. A lot of times you'll see if a property was purchased on a real estate contract, back in the day, they did not pre-record a fulfillment deed. So at the end of a payoff of a real estate contract, most of the time you'll see that parties will forget to record a fulfillment deed. So then the name on title for the property is not correct because the fulfillment deed wasn't recorded. The hyperlinks will be included so you'll be able to read through the documents related to a real estate contract and then help sort those things out. I currently have a property on the market. That's a good example of this when it comes to a real estate contract. The owner told me that the property was in his name when I opened preliminary title commitment. It definitely was not in his name. And in fact, it was purchased on a real estate contract. There was not a fulfillment deed recorded. And then through the chain of hyperlinked documents, we came to find out that the property was quitclaim deeded to a corporation. Then we needed to find the old corporate documents showing that he was part of the corporation in order to entitle the property correctly. So there was a lot of confusion related to that. And it's going to take the owner a little more of a lengthy process to do a quiet title action. But through me reviewing the title report and the hyperlinks and doing some investigative work, and then also with the help of my title representative, we were helping him sort out these title issues. Then another thing that you could find is if a death has taken place in the family. I have a home on the market right now where that is the case. The parents passed away. So the representative is not on title. Fortunately for him, he has gone through all of the proper steps with a real estate attorney. And so the sale is ready, title is ready to convey properly. And then there's also things that you might find on a title report, which are also important for proper conveyance of title. Is there a life estate or a first right of refusal recorded on property? I'm not going to speak on any kind of expertise related to those, but if those are recorded on title, then it's much harder to convey. And that could be a whole class in itself that I'm not going to get into. So here's an example of what I found for this property in Tacoma, where it was purchased on a real estate contract dated back to 1994. This is the seller's assignment. That was one of the addendums attached. So they had an original real estate contract. This was an assignment of that contract. There was many steps along the way for conveyance of this title, and it got more and more complicated every document that we found, specifically because they were old, there was no fulfillment deed, and the people had passed away. So I'll go back one more. And so you can see here in item number 3 at the bottom, this is where it would show you that there is a contract of sale recorded. And then you see that blue hyperlink that will take you to the original recorded document. Then on the next page, you see that there's an amendment. There's 3 more hyperlinks. and then an assignment of the contract. There's another one. Then there's another quit claim deed in item number 4, and another quit claim deed in item number 5. So these are all going to be listed under your Schedule B on your title report and your exceptions. And this one just unfortunately had a lot that we had to unpack, but this is where you would find it. This is what it would look like. So the other thing that we're going to talk about on a title report that you need to look at is liens on the property. Most obvious lien is your first mortgage. And I assume that, that's kind of at the top of the report, and you all look at that and you all see that on a daily basis. But sometimes you will find second mortgages that maybe your sellers didn't tell you that they had. That's going to play a factor into their seller's net sheet, their seller's net sheet, and then how you can best help them. There's also instances where you'll see down payment assistance programs that are recorded in that lien section. I am looking at that currently at a listing. The lady did not tell me that she had a down payment assistant. And when I use that hyperlink to read her actual lender's documentation, come to find out that her down payment program is not forgivable after 3 years. It is due no matter when. So it stays with life and sale of the property. Also in this lien section, you'll find things like outstanding utility charges. And that kind of goes to like a higher level of sellers not paying their utilities. You could find mechanics liens for like they had work done on their property and they never paid that contractor. That's where you'd find mechanics liens. You could find ULIDs, which are commonly called latecomer fees, and those are typically for development in infrastructure. They could be attached to a parcel. It's not very common. Excuse me, it's not very common that you would find that, but that's definitely an important part of looking through the liens that are attached to a parcel. For instance, if this, like say this city decided to do all underground power along a certain section of the block or blocks, they would attach a ULID, a latecomers fee, to that parcel. And that parcel has to pay that portion of the infrastructure and development of that underground power, whether they like it or not. You also might find judgments or bankruptcy items. I've actually seen both of those things. I've seen all of these things actually, which is funny. You'll find late taxes. They're like this item number 10 here shows delinquent taxes. 11 and 12 show that they're delinquent 3 years in their property taxes. This was a particular parcel that was on the market for a ridiculously low amount of money. And so I had an investor call me and say, hey, I'm really interested in buying this parcel, but it had been listed on the market for $750,000. Now it's on the market for $35,000. Let's try to figure out why. So I asked the agent to send me the preliminary title commitment, and lo and behold, this one was so full of liens and encumbrances. It was crazy, and my investor decided there was no way getting around any of these things, so we had to walk away. As you'll see here in item number 13, there was a deed of trust attached for $500,000. Let's see, and then items 14, 15, and 16 really threw myself and my title representative and my investor through a loop. We had never seen this many deeds of trust assigned to a piece of property. And then there was people had died in the process. They couldn't get a hold of them. There's liens. There's item number 17. You see, there's a lien for that he owes to a power company. Then item 18, there's a judgment of non-compliance from the city. And then items 26, 27, and 28. So what this guy did was he recorded liens from other property contracts onto this parcel, because those real estate contracts he had in his name and never got paid off. So he attached their payoffs to this parcel. So when this parcel sold, the buyer would have then been responsible for all of these payoffs. And they were, I don't even remember, upwards of close to $1 million. So there was no way that this pencil. Anyways, then you'll see things like this, bankruptcy court. You could see things like that. I sold a piece of property where the people were in a medical bankruptcy. And so I had to be sure that those were going to be paid off and were not going to be conveyed to the buyer at closing. As you probably remember from real estate classes, liens and encumbrances were talked about. Most of them do get paid at time of closing, so that it doesn't encumber the possession or doesn't become the responsibility of the buyer. But I truly believe that it's the best practice that we review all these attached documents in a title report and ask the questions to the title officer and make sure that you're conveying the information properly to your buyer. And it would be at the time of your title contingency period that you would be able to share the information with your clients, and then also email the title company so that you express your buyer's exception to those title issues. What typically happens is I'll email the title company and I will say, my buyer has exceptions to items 17 through 21. And the title company will respond back and tell you, 17 through 20 will be deleted at time of conveyance. Item number 21 will not. It will remain with property. And then you just go through those items and figure out if that's acceptable to your buyer. The next thing that I want to talk about that is probably one of the most important things to me. My niche in real estate is land and land development, and so it kind of makes me stressed out that typically if title reports aren't read, the biggest thing that gets overlooked is, are there easements and restrictions on a piece of property? So to me, this is probably the most important thing to look at on a title report. And when you hear the word easements, we probably all, harken back to our real estate classes, right? And we think of an easement as a road, and an easement is a road is a fine example of an easement. Except I believe that we need to educate ourselves at a higher level of what other easements could exist and how do those affect the property. As a sidebar, it's worth noting that I've recently experienced twice, maybe you guys already know this, but I'm just going to say it as a side note, that some lenders require, if it's a private road, that there be a private road maintenance agreement recorded on title before they will finalize the loan on that property. The two instances that I have run into were on VA loans. So I don't know if it's VA loan specific. I don't want to try to pretend that I know all about that, but I've run into that twice recently. So that's another thing that you can find on your title report. I do know that roads are an important easement to review on behalf of a seller or a buyer, mostly a buyer, because I would say the size of the road and the setbacks and the location all have to do with how much of the property is usable for that buyer. Along with roads, the same goes for trails, the same goes for utility easements, as the same goes for neighborhood shared easements. When you sell a house in a development, it is a good idea to look and be sure there are no shared utility easements or common use trails or common spaces that encumber that parcel that the house is on. It's a little more common than you think that it is. And, you know, you would be remiss if you sold somebody a new house and they had no idea that the shared neighborhood trail went through their backyard. And I think that they would be pretty mad at you for that if they discovered that later on in the fact. And you know as well as I do that you definitely get blamed as the real estate agent. So one other element to know about utility easements is not only do we need to look at underground utility easements, but overhead utility easements. You probably see utility easements on every single title report for a piece of property that is served by public utilities, because, you know, it just makes sense. Like, this is where the utility easement is installed on the parcel by Tacoma City Water and Tacoma City Power and Pierce County Sewer. So of course there has to be an easement for where those utilities are laid in the ground and located for maintenance and just the sheer development of where they're located. And so those are non-negotiable utility easements, so to speak. But it is good to be aware of them. Overhead utility easements can be a little bit more complicated. This is where you, if you remember in your real estate classes, the airspace comes into play. Overhead utilities, which would be your power, your phone, your cable, those use airspace utility easements. But also you could run into an issue where there is a power transmission line, the larger power transport lines, and those come along with larger easements and also setbacks. And here in Washington State, they are you can't develop, you can't build within those easements and setbacks. So those are important that you convey that information to your buyers. I have seen easements for every single one of these things that I have described. I sold a lakefront piece of property to a guy last year, and there's actually two sets of large power transmission lines that divides his property, so to speak. So the lakefront portion of his property is this big, and then the power transmission lines are in the middle, and then the portion where the driveway comes in from the main road is up at the top. The transmission line bisects his property. He can't build anything underneath it, and then he has setbacks from the air distance from the Puget Sound energy lines. He's trying to build a really large shop right there, and he needed to know that you can't come within a certain distance of those lines. You should also look for things related to a septic system, septic drain fields, and septic transport lines, so that your buyers know where they can and cannot build on their property. As we all know, you cannot disturb a drain field. You would never want to drive across or build on top of transport lines. But you can also find cases where the drain fields or the transport lines are on a neighboring parcel. So those are really important that you look at that information on behalf of your clients, so that they really very importantly need to know that information. That came into play for me 2 years ago. The neighbor's drain field was on this parcel, so I had to be sure that my buyers understood that this portion of their yard is the neighbor's drain field, and you can't do anything except grow grass and mow grass. They were okay with it, but it's obviously something that they need to know. My personal transport lines and my drain field, oddly, I septic transport lines go underneath our private road across the street and out the neighbor's side of their parcel. And then my drain field is located in a shared space behind my neighbor's, or in my neighbor's backyard. So I've seen all of these things, and they're very important that you are able to convey this information to your buyers properly. Occasionally you'll come across private well radiuses that are also in a shared situation similar to septic drain fields or transport lines. You could also come across railroad easements. Those aren't very common. I've come across them twice, and those provide their own unique nuances that I'm not going to get into, but that's also something that you can look for. I personally believe that not knowing what easements encumber a piece of property and what that means is a huge issue. If buyers don't know what easements exist and what that means for their property, then they could buy a piece of property assuming that they're going to build their 5,000 square foot house with a pool and a 3-car garage, only to come find out that they have, let's say only 6,000 square feet of usable space due to their easements and their setbacks. And they're going to be very angry. And again, they're going to blame their realtor. And we all know that. The last item under easements and restrictions is to understand that lots of properties come with covenants that are recorded against them. Commonly, these covenants are called CC&Rs. CC&Rs are something that you would mostly see in an established neighborhood, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. But there are some instances where covenants can be recorded completely outside of what you would see in a typical neighborhood, and they're recorded against the property. That could honestly be anything. You can write covenants against a parcel that you own in any way, shape, or form that you want and have it recorded against your parcel. It's kind of bizarre, but I've recently seen this in 2 instances, so I'm going to share that information. I was looking at a piece of land that is in a development zone for a housing project. But once I reviewed the title report, I discovered that there were covenants recorded against the 4 parcels by the original owner of the 4 parcels. It was very extensive. And one of the things that was very clear was that no further development would be allowed on any of the 4 parcels without his written consent, the written consent of the neighbor, and he named them specifically, and he had a date set on there. He had covenants recorded about what kind of landscaping could be done to all 4 of the parcels, landscaping and use of the joint road. It was very extensive, and needless to say, the property that this owner wants to sell cannot be sold for a development because of these covenants. So this is a situation where I would work with that original property owner to basically unrecord those covenants. You don't unrecord it, but basically you record a new document over the top that says those are voided. But and then I also sold a piece of property where the owner had she and her husband owned 3 conjoining parcels. She recorded restrictions against building anything on the 3 parcels, using or tapping into the shared well or extension of utilities. So in order to sell her property, she had to do what I just talked about, is record a new document that says those previous recordings are now null and void. Otherwise, my buyer would never have been able to use the property for more than just standing on and staring at the lake. He could have never done anything with it. So had I not gone thoroughly through that title report, I would have never seen the major restrictions that this owner put on her own property. And my buyer would have spent $650,000 on a lakefront lot that he could never have used. And that would have been pretty horrific. So some of the slides that I have are just to kind of give you an example of what you're looking for when you're looking for these easements. Item number 9 right here is the power transmission lines. And if you click that blue hyperlink, it will give you an exhibit. The exhibit is basically a drawing of what that looks like. And then item number 10, 11, and 12 are neighborhood restrictions that I was talking about. Item number 16 is a latecomers agreement. That kind of goes back to what I was talking about with LIDs under the lien section. The latecomers agreement was recorded with the Derringer School District here on this piece of property. Typically, latecomers agreements only last for 15 years. So in reviewing that document, I was able to affirm that cost had expired and was no longer valid. But on this lakefront property, the owner just recorded all these random restrictions. You'll see that here in items 17, 18, 19, and 20. They put an encumbrance on the shared well. They restricted the use of the property. They restricted the use of the water line. So I just can't express enough how important it is to actually read through a title report on it. I mean, truthfully, I could have gotten my buyer into a $650,000 vacant piece of property that he literally couldn't have used, and they would have to sit there and fight it out with the original property owner. And what if she had never agreed to delete those off of the property? That would be really terrible. So what is my advice to you? My advice is, when it comes to reviewing title reports, is to just start making it a part of your habit. Kat shared with me that in Ohio, they do not get the title report. Here in Washington State, we get the title report. It's more direct line of communication from the agent to the title company. In Washington State, maybe it's not that way in Ohio. Kat says she doesn't get the title report, but she does request it from her clients so that she can do this work. So if that's the instance where you don't get a copy of it, and just start making it best practice that you request that title report so you can review it, review those hyperlinks. If for some reason the hyperlinks aren't working, all you have to do is email your title company and say, hey, exception number 13, the hyperlink isn't working. Can you send me that specific document for review? I just, my advice is that we just start bringing a higher level of service to our customers for a litany of reasons, as they've kind of gone through. I kind of went through them fast, sorry. And then also, my advice would be that you start including a title addendum with your contracts, which gives your buyer time to review that title information and share their objections. So that, because if you don't have your objections lined up, then your buyer is assuming all of the things that they see on title. It now becomes part of their quote unquote problem when when title is conveyed to your buyer. Here in Washington State, we have an addendum for it. Ours is a 22T. And the boxes are very simple, like how you just put on the line, like how many number of days do you want to review that title? Do you want those days to start on mutual acceptance, or do you want those days to start when you receive the title report itself? I have had lots of communication back and forth with title companies. I've had to engage land use attorneys on behalf of my clients to get these objections removed from title. But it gives you best practice for your clients from the beginning of my presentation was more directed about sellers, like making sure they have proper seller on title and that they are actually ready to convey the property properly. And then the last half of what I'm sharing, or the most of what I'm sharing, is most really related to buyers. But I just honestly think that it's best practice that we all understand that there are a really long list of things that can appear on title, and it's best practice for us to get in the habit of reviewing all those things. And you're not going to know what you're looking at from the beginning. That's perfectly okay. Just engage with your managing broker or your designated broker, and most importantly, engage with your title representative and even your escrow person and say, hey, I saw this thing on title and I don't know what this means. Let's talk this through on behalf of my client. And then from there, you can convey the information to your client. And if there's any concerns, you can work through them. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. I know it's a pretty boring subject, or you probably think that it's a really boring subject, but I can assure you it is very important.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Kristina. We appreciate you taking the time to put together the presentation. And I haven't had any experiences like you've had, but I know that they're out there, and I always look through it and make sure that there's no unknown easements or things like that. But I haven't done as much of a deep dive as you do. I've relied on the title company to do that. So I think I will also be stepping up my game, like you said, just to provide a better service to my clients.